Good evening and welcome to the virtual Marion Minor Cook Athenaeum. My name is Will Frankel, and I'm one of your 3 Athenaeum Fellows this year. The vast majority of the time, the artistic power of poetry is reserved for those who seek it out. American pop culture usually hums on in prose. But every once in a while, verse can capture our collective attention and imagination. The most recent such occasion was at President Joe Biden's inauguration, where Amanda Gorman, the youngest ever poet laureate to read at an inauguration, generated international acclaim and earned herself an invitation to open for the Super Bowl. Amid Gorman's media tour after the inauguration, former First Lady Michelle Obama asked her in the pages of Time magazine where Gorman draws inspiration. Tonight, we will hear from the very first person that Gorman named. Yusef Komunyakaa is Distinguished Senior Poet in New York University's Graduate Creative Writing Program. His poetry weaves together personal narrative, jazz rhythms, and vernacular language to create complex images of life in peace and in war. His books include Neon Vernacular, which won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1994. Komunyaka's honors also include the Wallace Stevens Award, the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize, the William Faulkner Prize from the Université de Rennes, the Haynes Poetry Prize, and fellowships from the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, the Louisiana Arts Council, and the National Endowment for the Arts. He also served as Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets from 1999 to 2005. Using the written Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, we will be accepting questions throughout the program to be posed towards the end of the event. Preference will go to students, so when you send a question, please state your affiliation with the college. As always, I must remind you that audio and visual recording are strictly prohibited. And now, please join me in welcoming Yusef Komunyakaa to the Athenaeum.
A world of daughters. Say they cleaned at birth, say, weeping in the tall grass where this tantalizing song begins. Birds poise on a crooked branch over a grave of an unending track into the valley of cooling waters. Lessons of earth, old questions are more the first tongue. Say, I have gone back, says the oracle. Counting seasons and centuries, undoing fault lines between one generation and next, as she twirls sackcloth edged with pollen, and one glimpses what one did not know. Say, this is where the goat was asked to speak legends ago, to live and deliver a sacrifice. To feel a truth depends on how and why the singer's song fits into the mouth. Well, I believe the borrowed rib story is the other way around. Entangled in decree, blessing, law, and myth, one only has to listen to night-long pleas of a mother who used all thousand chants and prayers of clay, red ochre, blown from the mouth upon the high stone wall, retracing a final land bridge to Wishbone. My own 2 daughters and granddaughter. The 3 know how to work praise and lament, how to sprout wings of naked flight and labor, yes. The hinge into earth. We rose from Lucy to clan, from clan to tribe, and today we worship her sun-polished bones, remembering she is made of questions. No, Mama, is not always a first word, before counting eggs in the cowbird's nest. It begins in memory. Now say her name. Say, Dankness, mother of us all. It's good to be here. So I'm going to just keep reading. Slingshot. A boy's bicycle inner tube, red as inside the body. A well-chosen forked limb, sawed from a scrub oak. And then an hour-long squint to get it right. The taut pull is everything. There's nothing without resistance. And the day holds the hard, slow, steady honing flips a beetle on his back, but the boy refuses to squash it. He continues with his work. Summer rambles into a quiet quadrant of dogwood and gum. A girl he's too shy to tell his name stands in damp light near and dark. And biting a corner of his lip, he whittles the true stock, knowing wrong from right. Though Pythagoras owned a single truth, the boy untangles a triangle of pull within a triangle of release. The slingshots, tongue a tongue, torn out of an old army boot. And Lord, what a perfect fit. Feet spread apart, the boy straddles an imaginary line, settling quietly into himself. As the bounce and pull travel down through his fingers, forearm, elbow, into muscle, up through his shoulder blades, neck, mouth, set of the jaw, into the register of the brain, sand. Take a breath and exhale. Slowly. Then let the stone fly as if it has swallowed a stone. And that is when the boy knows his body is a compass, a cross. Ode to the maggot. Brother of the blowfly and Godhead, you work magic over battlefields and slabs of bad pork and flop houses. Yes, you go to the root of all things. You are sound and mathematical. In Jesus Christ, you are merciless with the truth. Ontological and lustrous, you cast spells on beggars and kings. Behind the stone door of Caesar's tomb, a split trench and a field of ragweed. No decree or creed can outlaw you as you take every living thing apart. Little, master of earth, no one gets to heaven without going through you first. Euphony. Hands make love to thigh, breast, clavicle, willed to each other, to the keyboard, searching the whole forest of compromises till the soft engine kicks in, running on honey. Dissidence work into harmony, even-handed, as Tatum's plea to the keys, like a woman and man who have lived a long time together. They know how to keep the song alive, wordless epics into the cold night, keepers of fire. The right hand lifts like the ghost of a sparrow, and the left uses every motionless muscle. Notes divide, balancing each other, love and hate tattooed on the fingers. Dead Reckoning. I should say that this poem was written before I went to Africa. And I think it speaks for itself what the subject matter is. Fishermen follow a dream of the biggest catch out among the tall waves where fresh water meets a salty calmness. For hundreds of years, they've crossed this body of water, casting their nets and singing old songs. They've slept with the village women, and ridden waves back to the other side to loved ones, now lost in the old clothes of unreason and wanderlust. Their nets sag with the loss of its kind, with bountiful fish stories, and soon the flirtatious mermaids are beckoning from a swoon of reeds, calling their names. The first dance is desire. The second dance is love. The tall grass quivers like a siren, snag, and a shabby net. Now, as if on a journey of lost souls, love and desire dance with death, twirling bright skirts till flesh and cloth turn into ashes. What did they do to make the gods angry? Forbidden laughter of the mermaids fills the night. And if humans try to sing this laughter, their voices only cry out in the dark. A visit to the inner sanctum. A poet stands on the steps of the grand cathedral, wondering if he has been a coward in hard times. He traveled east, north, south, and 7 directions of the west. When he first arrived on the other side of the sea, before he fell into the swamp into the flung open arms of a long romance. The lemon trees were in bloom. After a year poised on the riff of a purple haze, he forgot all the questions he brought with him. Couldn't he see the tear gas drifting over Ohio as flower children danced to Jefferson Airplane? Will he ever write a sonnet dedicated to the memory of 4 girls dynamited in a Birmingham church? Standing in the cathedral again, in the midst of what first calibrated his tongue, gold icons, the hidden jaguars etched into the high beams. He remembers an emanation almost forgotten. He can't stop counting dead heroes who lived in his head, sultry refrains that kept him alive in the country of clouds. Underneath the granite floor where he stands loom the stone buttresses of an ancient temple. When he was a boy, with his head bowed close to the scarred floor, he could hear voices rising from below, their old lingua franca binding with his. How could he forget? Outside the Institute of National Memory, he toasts the gods hiding between stanzas, the girl he left behind for enemy soldiers to rough up and frighten. She never stopped waiting for him, even after she lost herself in booze. Now he faces a rusty iron gate. Did she know someday he'd question a life till he held only a bone at the dull green door of an ice house where they stole their first kiss? To have laughed beside another sweetheart in a distant land is to have betrayed the soil of dispossession hidden under his fingernails. Suppose he'd pursued other smaller passions, singing of night dew. The dead ones kept him almost earnest, tangoing with wives of despots, entranced by stolen light in his eyes and hair. He never wanted to believe a pinch of salt for a pinch of sugar is how the scales are balanced. Islands. I should say this poem is dedicated to Derek Walcott. Islands. An island is one great eye gazing out and beckoning, a beckoning lighthouse searchlight, a wishbone compass, or a counterweight to the stars. When it comes to look out and point of view, A figure stands on a rocky ledge, peering out towards an archipelago of glass on the mainland. A seagull's wings touching the tip of a high wave out to where the brain may stumble. But when a mind clams down from its long, craggy lookout, we know it is truly a stubborn thing and has to leaf through pages of dust and light, through pre-memory and folklore, remembering fars rowed down there till they pushed up through the seafloor and plumes of ash covered the dead, shaken, awake, whirls away, and silence filled up with centuries of waiting. Sea urchin, turtle, and crab came with earthly know-how, and one bird arrived with a sprig in his beak. Before everything clouded with cries, a millennium of small deaths now topsoil, and seasons of blossoms in a single seed. Light edge along salt-crusted stones, across a cataract of blue water, and lost sailors' parrots spoke of sirens, the last words of men buried at sea. Someone could stand here contemplating the future, leafing through the torn pages of St. Augustine or the prophecies by fishermen, translating spur and folly down to taproot. The dreamy-eyed boy still in the man, the girl in the woman, a sunny forecast behind today, but tomorrow's beyond words. To behold a body of water is to know pig iron and motherhood. Whoever this figure is, he will soon return to dancing through the aroma of dagger's log, ginger lily, bougainvillea, between chants and strings struck till gourds rally the hill in air, and the church steeple birds fly sweet darkness home. Whoever this friend or lover is, he intones redemptive harmonies. To lie down in remembrance is to know each of us is a prodigal son or daughter, looking out beyond land and sky, the chemical and metaphysical, beyond falling and turning water for wheels in the colossal brain of damnable gods, a eureka held up to the sun's blinding eye, born to gaze into fire. After conquering frontiers, the mind comes back to rest, stretching out over the white sand. Fortress. Now, I begin with these two hands held before me as blessing and weapon. Blackbirds in fierce flight and instruments of touch and consolation. This sign means stop. And this one, of course, means come forth, friend. I draw a circle in the red iron clay around my feet. where no spirit dares to find me. One's hands raised at this angle over a boy's head or a roof over a sanctuary. I am a greenhorn in my fortress in the woods, with my right eye pressed to a knothole. I can see a buzz in the persimmon tree. It's ripe, letting go, a tiny white cross in each seed. The girl's fiery jump rope straps the ground. I see the back door of that house close to the slow creek where a drunken, angry man stumbles across the threshold every Friday. I see forgiveness, unbearable twilight, and these two big hands know too much about nail and hammer, plank and uneasy sky, hewn stone and mortar is another world. And sometimes a tall gate comes first, then huge barrels of grain, flour, salt meat, and quicklime before 28 crossbows in 4 towers. Okay, Ode to the Oud. Gourd-shaped muse, swollen with wind in the mulberry. Tell me everything you are made of, little desert boat of Ra. Oblong box of bedding dolls, pecking pomegranate seeds out of the air. You're the poet's persona. It's double in the high priest's third chamber. Each strain, a litany of stars over the Sahara. Pear-shaped traveler, strong but so light. Is there a wishbone holding you together? I wish I knew how to open you up with an eagle's feather, a pick whittled from buffalo horn, singing alive the dust of Nubia. Rosewood season long ago, I wish I could close your 12 mouths with kisses, tongues strung in a row. I wish I could open every sound in you. I envy one blessed to master himself by rocking you in his lonely arms. Little ship of sorrow, bend your voice till the names of heroes and courtesans, birds and animals, prayers and love songs swum from your belly. Okay, I think I'm going to read 2 more poems. The body remembers. I stood on 1 foot for 3 minutes and didn't tilt the scales. Do you remember how quickly we scrambled up and leaning out over the creek. How easy to trust the water to break. Avogoras leaps, the body remembers. Every wish one lives for a dozen, or even horror. Our dance was a rally in summer. Our dance was a rally in sunny leaves. Then quick as anything, Johnny Dixon was up opening his wide arms in the tallest oak, waving to the sky. And in the flick of an eye, he was a buffalo fish gig, pleading for help, voiceless. Bigger and stronger, he knew every turn in the creek past his back door. But now he was cooing like a brown dove in a trap of twigs. A water-horned spear of kindling jutted up, as if it were the point of our folly and humbug on the Sunday afternoon rite. 5 of us carried him home through the thicket, our feet cutting a new path, running in sleep years later. We were young as condom balloons, flowering crabapple trees in double bloom, and had a world of baleful hope and breath. Does Johnny run fingers over the thick web of his belly? Days we were still invincible. Sometimes I spend half a day feeling for bones, humming a half-forgotten ballad on a park bench a long ways from home. The body remembers the berry bushes, heavy with sweetness, shivering in a lonely woods. But I doubt if it knows words live longer than clay and spit of flesh as rock bottom love. Is it easier to remember pleasure? And does hurt ease truest hunger? Of a summer, rocking back and forth, uprooting what's to come. The shadow of the tree weighed as much as a man. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those wonderful poems. We're going to start off with some questions from the audience. So the first question is from a friend of the college asking, as a poet whose breadth of work spans decades, do you seek out new subjects when you sit down to write, or do you find yourself returning to the same subjects?
I would like to believe I seek out new subjects. I'm usually working on 2 or 3 different collections. And there comes that moment when I realize that I have to concentrate on a single one. So that's how I pretty much work. I try to seek things that surprise me.
Our next question is whether you agree with Baudelaire, whom you quote as saying that a poet has no allegiance but to the work of art, no country besides the heart.
I would like to believe that. At the time, I was quoting Baudelaire. I believe that, but let's face it. the human being is constantly changing. So I don't know if I still believe that wholeheartedly. At least I would say it is part of my psyche, not the full breadth of my psyche.
Has travel influenced you as a poet? And if so, how?
Oh gosh, I was traveling even before I set foot out of Louisiana, traveling within my mind as such. I could actually talk about how that happened, but I think we all do that, don't we? We daydream a whole lot. How has it changed me, this traveling? I think automatically there's a dialogue with whatever new landscape we come in contact with, the people. There's a dialogue. Even when we are not fully conscious of it, we are posing questioning. We are posing questions and we are hoping to get back some answers. And sometimes those answers, of course, comes out of the interior, the psyche. So yes, there's that dialogue going on. So I think we're changing as well. How could we not?
There's an incredible sense of sounds and meter in your poems. Do you ever feel a tension between musicality and the clarity of your content?
Oh gosh, I've said sometime that language is our first music and the body is the amplifier. So in a certain sense, we are conscious of rhythms. I think we sort of forget that, but I think small children are very conscious of rhythms. I read everything aloud, so that's part of it. And I've said a number of places, and I've even said today earlier that the ear is a great editor. I love all kinds of music. Yes, sorry.
You're so good. On the topic of reading, an audience member wants to know if you could say something more about the role of reading in relation to your practice as a poet.
Oh gosh, that's a hard one, isn't it? Because I read everything. I try to. It's not just literature. Science, philosophy. I used to think I could. It's impossible. One is not going to read all the books out there. No way possible. So we have to make choices. I read a lot of poetry, not just poetry committed to a single perspective, but whatever captures. If the poet has done his or her work, it comes alive, doesn't it? It challenges us to look sometimes quite differently than we would have at something very elemental.
Do you find yourself more often writing your poetry to be read off the page just silently, or is your inspiration and thought process behind reading poetry aloud and to be listened to?
I think it's both. I think I like to think about the poem, how it looks on the page as well. I I think both of those things are happening. Uh, I would hope so. But the appearance of the poem, we like to say, well, that's not the case, but yes, it is, you know. There's a kind of symmetry. We like things to be as concise as possible. But there's a kind of, we see the poem and we think of it as not a dream controlled, but as something made. The poem is a made thing.
In your collection, The Emperor of Water Clocks, you use nouns like brimstone and larkspur. What is your process of noun finding?
Whatever, well, I think it happens when I am speaking the poem to the page. Those things happen. It's just who we are. I love language, you know. I love to laugh as well and say, where did that come from? For all the writers out here, I'm quite sure you like to have that happen as well. You say, gosh, where did that come from? And you realize that musically, it is correct, that you probably couldn't have said it any other way, but that particular way, at that particular time in your life.
Do you think that you could talk about your master's at UCI? This was probably quite a while ago now, but how did the program
Yes,
there?
it was a long time ago, yes.
How did the program there influence or inform your writing practice? And what were the tenets of the education there?
Well, it's very interesting because I had already received a master's from Colorado State University. And I was really attracted to what Charles Wright was writing. I had read, I think, Grave of the Left Hand, and also at that particular time, Chandler Trace was the book that made me write. Well, I only sent one application to one graduate school, and that was UC Irvine. And had my fingers crossed, but it happened. I was drawn to some of the fellow graduate students, especially Garrett Hungo. You know, I was taken with what he was writing, and just a dialogue within the context of the workshop as well. I thought it gave, everyone wrote differently. That was the other thing that I was excited about, that it wasn't just one voice coming out of a workshop, but there was room for multiple voices. And I think that's what happened there.
How do you cultivate surprise in your writing?
How do I create, pardon me? How do I?
Cultivate surprise in your writing.
Oh, cultivate, I wish I could cultivate it, but no, it just happens, you know. When I laugh and say, where did that come from? It's the fact that it happens in the process of writing. It's not thought about or plotted. or anything of that sort. It just happened. It happens in the act of writing. That's the same thing as we experience the world. It happens. It's not a methodical project in how to see, but how to be. We in the world, we are, each of us, a complex organism. So we are seeking connection.
Our next question comes from a Claremont McKenna professor who is following up on the question about the word larkspur and noun searching. Do you often write words that may well not have crossed your lips? And if the answer is yes, what does that mean to you?
Not have crossed my lips. No, I think they have crossed my lips some way because they're there in my psyche. Maybe they have crossed even with silence sometimes. The tongue is an interesting ledger. Although sometimes we say, well, we probably wouldn't even have known speech as early as we did if there weren't snakes. No, I don't know what I mean by that. Yes, I do, but I won't go into it. I like how words also musically fit side by side, how they relate to each other. Sometimes there's a kind of incongruous way, but something says they relate to each other tonally and imagistically.
Is it difficult to sing in a poem when writing about the cruelty of the world?
Is it difficult to sing inside the poem? Gosh, that's such an interesting question. I think sometimes we are able to sing around that cruelty, not sing directly through it, that we sing around it. And that helps to create a certain kind of tension. I hope that's an answer.
Okay. Certainly. Our next question comes from a student who's wondering what the main lesson as a professor that you hope to instill in your students as writers by the time they finish your courses.
That's an interesting question because it really depends on, I think each student is quite different. So even the expectation would be different, but a kind of I like to think of the class as a community of ideas. And it's not just one standing in front of the class, handing down everything prescribed, but it's an atmosphere where there's a kind of communication going on, where there's trading. You know, I may have an idea about this, but I'm also willing to change. So it's a dialogue, going back to more of a Socratic mode. It's a dialogue.
How have you found the experience of presenting your poems via Zoom?
Oh gosh, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. I don't know how. I'm not really tech savvy, but when we went on lockdown over a year ago, or I taught my class, the final weeks of my class, and that was a learning process on Zoom, you know. But I like to have that sort of eye contact, that kind of the vitality of each individual there.
Continuing on a similar subject, will you talk about your year of confinement and isolation and the role that poetry has played in it, if any?
Oh gosh. Well, it's a place where I keep reading, that's for sure. But also, I came up with early on a friend of mine, Lauren McComb. I wrote her 3 terces, 9 lines, and I had a title. The title is Trading Riffs to Slay Monsters. And she wrote 9 lines back, and we created this loop. So that was one way. But also I began writing essays. Yeah.
After years of inspiring younger poets, what contemporaries would you like to keep in the dialogue?
What contemporary? To keep in the dialogue. I would like to say, okay, for me, observation is so important. Not necessarily commentary, but observation, the act of observing is very important. Not with a preconceived notion, but just an open observation about human life, nature, not that we are acted upon, but the fact that we are a part of everything around us. I think it was James Baldwin who said, we have to know what's happening around us in order to know what's happening to us.
How do you believe that we can make poetry feel more accessible? In the same way that people not well versed in film do feel comfortable talking about movies, how can we make those not well versed in poetry feel comfortable talking about poems?
Well, it's interesting because I tend to think about that project by Robert Pinsky called the Favorite Poem Project, because apparently he had the idea that there were lots of people who knew something about poetry, who had memorized certain poems. So there were farmers, There were very young people. There were very old people, new poems, you know? So, we often people want to know, do I understand the poem? I would say, read the poem a number of times. Not just one time. It is not an ad for an emotion. Poetry has been with us for so long for simple reason because poetry has dealt with mysteries. Mysteries of this human existence. Not to be afraid of poetry.
Unfortunately, we're reaching the end of our hour. Before we conclude, wanted to give you the opportunity to share any closing remarks you might have with our attendees.
I would just like to say thanks for being here and keep posing those questions that keep us human.
On behalf of Claremont McKenna College and the Athenaeum, thank you all for joining us tonight. A special thanks to Yusef Komunyakaa and to all of those who sent in questions. Don't forget to join us for our next virtual Athenaeum event, which will be tomorrow, Tuesday, March 23rd at 5 p.m. Pacific. Candice Valenzuela, CMC class of 2006, will join us to discuss responsible leadership and her run for Congress in 2020. See you all then.